Like, so for
Right.
instance, let's say that Anivia, who's really, really weak to being outranged, right? But
Hmm.
let's just say that Anivia is so imbalanced. Like her damage numbers or synergy with items or her HP or like, her cooldowns or stuff. It's too much for even the champions that are supposed to be able to beat her. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
League has only had this, I think, a few times in its history. I actually think one of them was, do you remember CC and Vulnerability Rengar?
Uh, was that season 5 or something?
I think it was season 7. It was when
I think
would
I remember.
he
Yeah.
would cast his break free thing and then he would still be CC immune.
Right. Yeah. 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 For like a
So
brief amount of time.
right, right,
Yeah.
right. So the comps that were supposed to be able to beat him because of this feature of his kit, he was able to resist even those comps with like good play or something, right? He's just too strong. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so like stuff like that exists, but very rarely are these are champions existing that are like super giga omega lol broken. Now,
Hmm.
when it comes to like competitive play, obviously certain teams have certain crutches, like they actually just can't play enough champions. Now, this is a problem with professional League of Legends. It's not a problem with draft per se. It doesn't change that assuming a even level of play with extremely high level players that draft in theory should actually become extremely difficult. But against generic LCS, LEC, LCK, LPL teams, draft is still actually relatively easy because a lot of teams operate from a lot of constraints inside of the draft phase, right? So things are
Hmm.
much more generic. And they do things like they blunder bans, or they pick things too early, or they stack a theme very early in the draft. So like stuff like Jhin, Jhin is technically like he's somewhat flexible, but he has such a core weakness, and then there's multiple archetypes that are good against him, right? So
Hmm.
even if it's like as a standalone he's good, he's not B1able because there's archetypes that are good against him. So now the opponent can recognize this and try to layer against or position themselves to pivot into said archetypes without compromising themselves. Now,
Yeah.
so
So.
well, I'll just give you this example. So from the
Oh, okay.
last game, here's the problem, right? They open Talia Pantheon. Now, Talia Pantheon gets interesting if the mid laner, jungler, AD carry, and support can all play Talia. Pantheon gets interesting if if all 5 players can play him, pretty much. If the jungler,
Hmm.
AD carry, support, top laner, mid laner can all play Pantheon. This is an interesting opening. Now, the problem with it though is that it's on red side. It's red side Talia Pantheon. Um, which is kind of weird because they're commit. Ooh, crap. Sorry. They're committing to a. Can you see when I draw? I don't know
Yeah,
if
I can
chat
see.
can.
Yeah.
Oh, chat can't. Chat can't. Okay, so
Oh,
they're
okay.
committing to a theme. No matter what, Pantheon and Talia generally have to go in. Now, if Talia is going to pivot into controlling terrain, controlling surface area, and trying to play long range and trying to kite backwards, now why do you have Pantheon? Because even though, yes, he can do those things, he can play defensive with W, can play defensive with E, he can, he can control split pushers, he can enable split pushers and all that. That's not his best mode. So even though he's able to do it, he's worse at it. I would liken this to like maybe someone's an MMA fighter, right? And they can grapple, you know what I mean? But they're not particularly good at it. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's not something that they should be looking to do, or something like that. Now, in the draft, what ended up happening is enemy team goes Echo Anivia. Now, I was talking about how this gets really scary if the Anivia can play support. Or if the support player can play Anivia, because then things get really scary. Because when you're looking at this right now, Echo is really good against Talia's pivot attempt, which is to try to go and play long range or like backline, right? Um, and Echo is really good at just beating poke. He's very good at disruption. He's very good at beating the things that beat Jhin and Anivia. And so that is currently present. Now, the problem is that Talia and Pantheon, neither of them really share any of those things in their theme, in their kit, right? So now, all of a sudden, you're stuck with an R1 and an R2, and you have to actually pivot your entire comp into something else because the enemy's B1 through B3 is so good at beating basically all of your modes. If you try to
Mm-hmm.
run in on them, Anivia Wall, Anivia Glacial Storm, right? Echo W, Jhin W, Lotuses like on the floor, Curtain Call, like all these other things, and the enemy team's blue side. So you actually lose a lane. You don't have access to top lane for split push. So there's a lot of problems happening where it's like now it's like, well, if you try to pivot into Fiora, you try to pivot into a split pusher, yes, you can do that, but it's not as strong as if you were on blue side, where you have two lanes, you only have one lane now. And so Talia and Pantheon are also a little bit more hurt because all of this surface area is a lot harder to control than just your blue side jungle. For like Weaver's Wall, Grand Skyfall, and whatever else. So to
Yeah.
me, if you know in your heart of hearts this guy cannot play Anivia support, I think the only winning line is to find Kassadin on R3. Now, obviously, Kassadin's getting hurt by Talia. He doesn't like that Talia's there. Talia doesn't like that Kassadin's there. They're trying to do different things, but this is the only way you can sort of win. Kassadin pairs with the theme identity of Talia Pantheon. Kassadin answers Jhin, Anivia, and Echo. Kassadin survives in isolation against them, right? And Kassadin can also potentially go top lane, right? So he has some flex potency. So he's one of the few champions in the game that can answer all the themes and then still somehow couple with his own teammates, even though him and Talia still don't really like each other that much. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. If anything really doesn't make sense, or you think I'm wrong on something, just stop
Yeah.
me.
I
And
just want to clarify something.
yeah,
So you're saying that like after enemy picks Jhin,
yes,
ru- picking Talia Panth on R1 R2 is kind of like rushing into a comp.
yes,
Like
yes, yes,
if blue responds correctly,
yes,
they're pretty much fucked.
yes.
Because like you're saying Kassadin is the champ that could maybe save them, which is kind of rough for
Kassadin's
Red to
rough,
be put
and
in.
I'll show you why
Yeah.
Kassadin's are rough, assuming like game theory optimal level of play. This is why Kassadin's rough. Let's choose an AD carry
Yeah.
now, because
Sounds
we're let's choose an AD carry. Let's do Ash because Ash is probably one
yeah,
of
it's
your
like
only
an
outs.
utility. Yeah,
Right. You need
exactly.
utility, you need terrain control, you need something that can push back against Anivia, and you need something that also has like harmony with other champions, right? Ash
Hmm.
Pantheon, Enchanted Crystal Arrow, with Weaver's Wall, Grand Skyfall, all this other stuff, pick
Hmm.
potency, etc.
Yeah.
Isolation, she's able to stand alone, and then also what she does is she retains both Talia and Pantheon to still be flexible. She still retains that for you. Now the problem here is if Anivia laughs and says, "Actually, I can go support," and this happens. What is Kassadin doing?
Yeah, it's pretty confusing where
It
blue's going.
like where what is even the play here? Like
Yeah.
I think the only play now is Xerath R5. Um, do you know
But
what I
then it
mean?
kind of yeah, it
Now
looks
it's
weird for
off
red.
theme again. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
exactly.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And everything is just a shit show. And now it's win
Yeah.
lane or just die. Um, because even if this team gets ahead, barring Kassadin being 4-0 and over leveled and everything else, how do you beat two-item Gangplank, two-item Graves?
Hmm.
They don't
Exactly.
they don't have the burst. There's no
Yeah.
damage, and now you have so much magic damage. You're also so Ash doesn't deal enough because she cannot actually reliably get in range against these champions. She just can't, right? Enemy team just gets to go Merc Treads, or they just get to hold on to null magic mantles. So it's like
Hmm.
even if you Xerath, I mean,
It's
what
pretty
what do
bad.
you
Yeah.
achieve? It's bad. Yeah, it's really bad. So like, what other option on R5 even really exists at this point? I mean, I guess you have option to do Vel'Koz. Same thing though, right? It's the same thing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I would say Vel'Koz is more impacted by Gangplank than Xerath is. And Vel'Koz is he's a little bit more susceptible to Echo than Xerath is and whatnot. So we're looking for a champion that can answer this theme and then somehow not just like keel over and die. And it's like what is actually even what is even the possibility? I'm not even. I mean, you could do something like super mentally ill. Um, you could try to do something like you could try to do Ziggs and then go Ash, mandate support. But now you have so much magic damage. Now the one upside is that Talia and Ziggs' damage comes out so consistently, they're not as impacted by MR stack. And the other thing is that like the only person now you're really worrying about with like MR stack is predominantly going to be Graves. The others can't really reliably get it as much. I mean, they're still going to get Merc Treads, right? But Graves is going to get Spirit Visage. Graves is, he has the ability to go Hex Drinker. Things like that. It become really bad.
Mhm.
But like, I guess that's an option. Pivot Ash support and then try to go something like that to try to fight back. Maybe you go Zareth AD so that you actually have higher damage up. But then again, it's like, why do you have these champions? So even Kostanen on R3 is kind of weird. You can only do it if you know Anivia can't go support. Um,
Right.
if you don't know that, then I think that you have to play an honest game, and you have to try to do some crazy stuff. You got to try to do like Zillion and play a skill game, but obviously Anivia is favored. So now we're losing, but we're trying to make up ground as much as we can. Like right now, if there was like an imaginary like measurement bar, right? Blue team is just they're enormous. It's
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
like 80% favorite, 85. Your goal is to try to bring that number down as much as you possibly can to give yourself the best hope that you can in that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Zillion suddenly becomes something. Zillion does become an option. You can try to do Ziggs and these other champions, but again, I mean, it's Echo and Jhin are doing stuff. You could do something really interesting where you could try to you could still try to conceal triple flex and try to evaluate, and then you would have to go another flex on R4, and then this can maybe get confusing for the enemy team, where you try to accept that they will destroy you in a giant circle, but with Kindred's ultimate and something else, maybe you can win. Like maybe you can do something like Kled, right, on R4. Now Kled can go mid, he can go top still, right?
Yeah. It's on theme. Yeah. Yes.
Um, Kled could technically go bottom with Pantheon or something like that, right? Like a kill lane.
Hmm.
Um, and then Kindred could. It depends what they pick. Now, if enemy team does something really weird, now they should know that Kled's trying to come in. All of these champions are trying to come in. So like, what you're trying to go for here now is just like, okay, this team comp is so all in that if they do not win by 15 minutes, 16 minutes or whatever, if they don't win at 1.5 2 core items, they're gonna lose the game. Like if the blue team is down
Yeah.
3,000 gold, they're still gonna win the fight. So we're just gonna
Yeah.
choose champions that basically say F you. We're okay. Like even if somehow bot lane like loses, we're still okay. We're actually fine even if bot lane loses. So like if you do stuff like this, like GP Taric, or you do something like Graves Taric, B4 B5. It's like what comes in on R5. Like I guess this is the best that you could have hoped for. And now you're sort of like you're sort of Omega lol all in. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
this is it, I guess.
Tech. Yeah. Tech's good here.
Yeah. So it's really really brutal to try to play this one out. And then like, what is your 80 carry? Like, are you gonna stick with Talia Pantheon versus Jhin Taric? You could actually. That is a lane that you could play. You could send Kindred into the jungle, and you could do Talia Pantheon, and then you get some access to something in mid lane. And then at this point, Kostanen comes back online, and now you have an alternate win con. Something like this is probably fine. You could do something like Ornn, I guess. Like all of these are obviously not ideal. Um, but yeah, it sucks. It definitely this is
Yeah.
definitely
It
feels
just
bad.
comes full circle again. Yeah.
Right,
Because the one two, I think people are just like blindsided by like, oh, this OP is up. We should just play it,
right,
even
right,
though it
right, right,
doesn't
right,
match the Jhin. You know.
right,
So
right.
it's
So
kind of hard.
right. So this is where problems beginnerizing, right? So if we do something like Graves R1, let's see, let's do Graves R1, and then let's do. Could do. I mean, you could do Graves Soraka. You could do Graves Yone. You could do. I mean, you could do a lot of things like this. Both of which I think are somewhat fine, but I think Graves X with more flexibility would just be more ideal. I mean, you could Graves Oriana are both weak to the same thing, so you don't want to do Graves Oriana. It's the same problem again. You could do Ziggs if you can Triflex him. Then I think Ziggs is viable as an early pick. If you
I
know
think Rumble could be fine too.
Rumble has a theme that goes in. He does have defensive too. I just don't. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Rumble, but I don't disagree with you that he does have some forgiveness on both modes,
Yeah.
and he can go to different lanes and whatnot. So you're mostly looking at stuff like this. I mean, you could also just play honest and go Caitlyn or something.
Sand check it.
Yeah, you could just match AD carry, and I guess that would be fine. But I like things
Yeah.
like Ziggs that really conceal everything,
Yeah.
because then where's Graves going, where's Ziggs going, yada yada yada. Now, if
Mhm.
they do something like I don't know, let's say they do something like what Nautilus, right? And then what?
Yeah,
I don't
that's
even
the typical response. Yeah.
I don't even.
Probably match jungle. Yeah.
Yeah, so if they do Nautilus, oops, sorry, I canceled that. Yeah, I don't know what they match in jungle. Like, let's say they do something stupid, right? Let's say they do something absolutely awful like Olaf, right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, people pick Olaf, right? Oh no, let's do
Mhm.
the classic. Let's do the classic, right? Lee Sin. Okay, so now what? Nautilus has to come in, Lee has to come in, right?
Yeah.
All right, now let's begin the layering process. Like that's literally it. Now you just
I
begin the
mean,
layering.
yeah. I mean, I think Gragas is fine here. Just
Grog,
counter the dive.
Gragas would be
And you can
fine.
flex it top
Right.
support jungle. Yeah.
Gragas is fine. Poppy's fine. Gangplank's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like if this is season 10 Gangplank, this is the freest Gangplank spot in the entire world. You just slam
Mhm.
Gangplank on R3, and I still think that you probably can, especially he's getting buffed again. So that's kind of nice. Like let's do
Mhm.
GP. Let's do GP R3. GP flex mid top, Graves flex mid top jungle AD, Ziggs flex mid top AD, um, and then we move into the next draft phase. Now, the thing that you could do is like maybe you want access to Anivia, right? You could ban Kosidon. You basically ban the most obnoxious potential disruptions that you're having
Mhm.
a hard time reaching, right? Now again, there's Vel'Koz, there's Xerath, but you do have Gangplank, so you do have some value there, and you also have Ziggs, so you can sort of like match it, right? You could do something like ban Echo, but he would only be a mid laner, so he's not going to come in blind. You could just ban one of the two. Vel'Koz, you could ban Vel'Koz, or you could ban Xerath, or something like that, right? And then on R4, you already know that they're all coming into you, and that they don't really have a lot of options. I mean, you could do stuff like you could Braum is terrible. I really don't like Braum. You could just Gragas. That would be another option. And again, four-way flex still, right?
Yeah.
Like where the
Really
hell is
good.
Gragas going? Like what
Yeah.
is going on? And then you pass it back to enemy team, and I don't know, they do something stupid like Oriana because it's good with Lee Sin, but it's losing to Ziggs. Victor's losing to Ziggs. Like
Yeah.
what are they picking? Right? That doesn't just
I mean,
prevent.
yeah, they just have to commit to dive, but it's just worse. So.
Yeah. So they blunder B2B3. Now again, this doesn't mean that red team just wins the game, but assuming it's an even level of play, they have a much higher chance to win the game. That's all that it is.
Mhm. Just
It's
better
sort of
gear.
like in
Yeah.
a trading card game matchup. Just because you get a really good matchup doesn't mean that you automatically win. Um, you can still lose. Things can still go wrong. You could misplay, like whatever.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. Let's say that they play it like standard people play it sometimes. I don't know what they would pick into to GP. Maybe they pick Shen or something. I don't know, man. I really have no idea what they would end up
Hmm.
picking. So let's say that they pick Shen or something like that. Now you get your pick of the litter. Um, you know, so Ziggs is probably gonna go mid, right? Ziggs is gonna go
Yep.
mid. GP will go top. Graves will go jungle, and then Gragas will go support. You get your pick of the litter for 80 carry. And then one sec. Yeah, you get your pick of the litter for 80 carry. And at this point, like all you need is something that can basically survive like a hard all-in engage, and that is like self-sufficient and whatnot, and everything's gonna be fine, right? Like you could just Ezreal in a spot like this.
Yeah.
That would be fine. All of this is winning for sure. Yeah, this is all. I mean, this is all. Yeah, this is all fine. It's definitely all fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Uh,
it's just good to see, but like obviously, red side draft is like really dependent on people flexing champos and shit. So
yes. Red is the
yeah,
most broken if you can flex.
exactly. Yeah.
Blue gets interesting though because red does have to commit on R4. R4 is where red can blunder.
Hmm.
Um, Draft. R4 is a really key pick. Generally, R4 tries to remain as ambiguous as possible or as like non-committing, to anything so that it can obviously
Yeah.
save R5. I mean, this is like understood that R5 is big, but it's not utilized the way that it should be, which is the problem. So like blunders on R4 can let blue win on B4, B5. Now, obviously, B1 is an interesting problem, right? Because you're looking for champion. Now, obviously, like the answer is to choose a multi-flex, multi-theme champion on B1. That's the answer to B1, right?
Yeah.
Because what you're basically saying is, can you please blunder R1, R2?
Hmm.
And this becomes the war. This becomes the mini game. Now, when you factor in teams, maybe you know enemy AD carry can't play these champions. Maybe you know enemy mid laner doesn't play AD mids. Maybe you know enemy jungler doesn't play this champion. So then you can start to like sideboard more effectively. And what I mean by that is like you can start to, if you have like 3 options between a top laner, choose the one that is most thematically powerful against that person and that person's team's tendencies. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like if they have different options. Um, so stuff like that starts to become good. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Holy shit, another game started. I'm
Yeah. You can watch
fucking
the game.
late. Okay.
That was a lot. Yeah.
All right. I'll talk
No,
to you
it
later.
makes sense though. Yeah, he cleared up a lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
We'll talk later.
All right. Bye. Good luck.
All right.
See you.
See ya.